No, see, look, it's on now, okay? All right, see? Oh, God. Hey, everybody, this is Claire, and this is a very special edition of Small Joyful Things.
Claire with two heads.
Because I am back in Ireland, and I'm going to show you guys a piece of Irish history with a little bit of help from my idiot brother and my dad. So, here you go.
We're supposed to go into copyright claim. We're supposed to go over back in there.
Okay, so what we have here is an early 20th century Irish Free State officer's sword. It is brass handle, snakeskin hilt here. This is steel, and then the actual scabbard itself is made of black leather. And I think that this one's restored, isn't it? It was damaged before.
It was damaged at the very bottom here, so we had to put a new. I went to a guy who used to do saddles and horse things, and he managed to put on a thing at the end here again and repaired it that way.
Okay.
There was also a tassel. There were two tassels on this that have over time have fallen off. And I have one somewhere in the house. I had to go find it, and the other one, I don't know what became of it.
Yeah. So obviously it's taken a little bit of damage. This thing is like over 100 years old. Yeah. So how big is it? Because we have to measure it. Always important to measure it. How long is it?
I'm holding it here.
Okay. We have 39 inches.
39 inches,
okay.
which is how many centimetres?
99.
It's just short of a metre.
Yeah. So it's pretty.
I think it's exactly a metre. Everything.
Yeah.
Taking it this way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Across the
Go on.
top.
Okay, just take it there now. It's probably just
99 inches on the nose.
yeah, just short of a metre.
99 centimeters.
Yes.
Okay. So, so the scabbard itself, right? It's unusual specifically because it's black. Now, it would have originally had a belt with it, which is called the Sam Brown belt, if that's what it's called.
A Sam Brown belt.
Yeah. And that is a particular belt that they were using in if I remember correctly, the World War One. And so, for reference, this is a ceremonial sword. This is not like an actual real sword.
There's no sharp edge.
There is no sharp edge. It is very pointy. It's very, very pointy. So what you can see here, again, this is one of the earliest swords from the Irish Free State. We have this lovely etch pattern here with that there, which says Óg Ig na hÉireann, and that is also on the hilt right here.
That's the badge of the Irish Armed Forces.
Yeah, the badge of the Irish Armed Forces. So you take that. Now, there is a story about how this actually came into possession of our family specifically. This is what we call our family sword. So, so Dad, you want to say, like, where did it come from?
To follow it chronologically, going back in time, okay? Allegedly, the sword was commissioned straight in 1922, around that time, and so was the scabbard. The scabbard was black because it was used for Michael Collins's funeral, who was the founder of the Irish state. One of the pallbearers, one of the guys, Guard of Honour, at his funeral, eventually went to live in a place called Buttevant, County Cork, in Ireland. He never married and had no children, but he kept the sword, and he also kept the black scabbard. They were specially commissioned from instead of brown because of the funeral. When my uncle, who was named Cornelius, commonly called him, when he, in 1939, he joined the Irish Army as a second lieutenant, and he had to get a sword. And the story was, the man who lived in O'Brien's Territory, they all grew up, he grew up just a few doors down from this guy who had the sword, and he gave it to him as a present, because he was going into the army. Now he said it was the whole sword, but I think it was probably more the black scabbard, more so than the actual. It could have been the sword itself, I don't know, but it looks too good a design to have been for 1922. So the sword might have come afterwards, or in 1939. But I think the scabbard itself probably came around 1922. My uncle had it, and when my grandmother died, the sword moved up to my house in Limerick, and I used to keep a bit of Vaseline on it and keep it for him. So when he died, then he said that I could have the sword, and that's how I got in my possession.
Yeah, so now
That's the story of it.
yeah, so the interesting thing, right, is that I did do, because I'm good at the real research, I did a bunch of research on essentially the design of the sword, right? And what I've effectively found is that this is this is one of the original design pattern from the sword. The sword itself was made by Wilkinson out of the UK, believe it or not. Now it does have a mark on the blade here, if you see it, and it says H proved. And I trace that as being the mark of these outfitters out of London called Hawks, or possibly Dublin. I got to check that. And the interesting thing about this is that the original designs for this, like this is the hilt you have here. This is the etching pattern, okay? And the interesting thing about it is that this pattern has the mark of Wilkinson's here. This one doesn't because it was too early. I think the sword was made around 1924, and the reason that Wilkinson is not actually on the etch pattern here, because it would have been on this pattern here, this is one from 1926, is because essentially the British government put pressure on Wilkinson not to make it obvious that they were making swords for the Irish Free State, the Free State who had literally just fought the War of Independence to break away from the UK. And it was,
well, I think
it was political.
1922, Winston Churchill had a decree saying when the British forces leave Ireland, they have to leave nothing behind. No guns, no artillery, as much as they could, take out as much as they could. Just give Ireland just enough to, barely enough. That's why when it came out to World War II, Ireland was just while we were neutral, because I think they had a total of something like 2 anti-aircraft guns in the whole country. You know? Yeah. Because everything else was taken when the British were departing. You know?
So the first swords of the Irish Free State or whatever, they were definitely made by Wilkinson. They were definitely supplied by Hawks outfitters, and at the time I believe that the swords actually had to be bought by the officers. Okay, so this was not used, like the sword itself was definitely made after Michael Collins's funeral, because Collins died in 22. The scabbard is the one that we're not sure about, basically. Now, I have a little bit here on Michael Collins' life and biography and all that, definitely worth reading. I recommend taking a look at it. Now, the other really interesting thing about the sword is that I met a woman whose family had another sword of this kind, and she actually had more history about it, because her great grandfather was a guy called Burns, I believe, and there's actually a photo of him with Arthur Griffith, the first president of Ireland, and he was the standard bearer. He carried the flag, and he also has a picture of him wearing one of these swords, and that would have been in the 1920s as well. And she had a bunch more of information about it, about the fact that they had to buy all their swords, and like these were the first swords that were made for the Irish Free State officers, and that was really useful. It was also pure chance or whatever that I met her. She's from Wicklow, and I actually met her in Canada. So here we go. Yeah, very small world. It's yeah. So the sword itself is there's always a question, like something like this is essentially a piece of Irish history. The story about Michael Collins' funeral is not something we're ever going to be able to confirm, not definitively. But there's always a question, like, what is something like this worth? And the problem with these swords is that they don't come up very often, and it's really, the scabbard is neither here nor there. So the last comparable price I have for it is this one. This is an auction from 2008, and this is an Irish Free State officer sword complete with leather scabbard, the tip of which is damaged, present brass hilt with ugly heron, and 32 inches in the blade. And this would have sold under the hammer in 2008 for 2,115 euro. So do your conversion there to get that in dollars or whatever you like. This one, being well restored and mostly complete, is maybe worth a little bit more. Like you can see that this one is missing the leather wrap and the leather wrap and the handle, and obviously the scabbard's been fixed, and it still has this piece of the belt with it. And yeah, and I can confirm as well, if you actually hold this up, it's a nicely balanced sword considering it's ceremonial and not meant to be used. It is very, very heavy, and the grip is really interesting because it is actual snake skin. It's a very unusual piece of Irish history.
This one hit anybody with it.
No, you don't hit anyone with it. It is very old, but it's in great condition for its age. Anything else you want to say about it, Dad?
No, that's about it. No,
yeah. So
it's a pretty distinct went. Yeah.
It's fine. So this is going to be staying in my family. I believe that the next one in line to get it is my brother, as the oldest son.
My son now.
Well, he better,
Yeah.
he better be nice to his dad.
Yeah. So thanks very much for watching, guys. This is my small joyful thing for the day. I'll leave Dad to go and finish his coffee now.
Okay.
Thank you very much for watching.
Have fun, you two.
Bye.